appreciate
Thank
you
you,
being
bro.
here and having this discussion with me because you have a lot of knowledge out there. You live on the location of the place that you believe is Atlantis, and it's right in your own backyard. Actually, before I even hit recording, I said to you that I like to go to the history of my own backyard, the
Yeah,
museums and stuff like that, and record it
yeah.
and stuff like that.
And
So
I wanted to tell you something. I think that's fantastic what you're doing, and essentially, I'm doing the same thing as you're doing. Got my
yeah.
cameras, my drones. I go out. And the like just last weekend, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, who's a historian, and I went out just down the road to these prehistoric sites that are just down the street from you, 20 minutes away,
Yeah.
and you just pop there's nobody was there, and popped up the drone, clambered into some caves, made it look exciting because it is exciting,
Hmm.
and if you can do that, you should do it. There's nothing more. You talked about AI is becoming. I read something kind of interesting um, regarding AI videos, AI imaging, that X%, a fairly high percent, I think it was like 20% of the internet is now being filled with AI content. And what that is creating is because AI scours the internet in order to make more AI content. And so it's now copying itself in a sense. So it's important that people make fresh, new content,
Yeah.
and there's just no comparison. I mean, I like AI
Yeah.
for the use of what you can do with it. Sometimes if I want to whip up a quick script for a video, I tell it the
Yeah.
general idea of what I want, and it'll give you a great script because you tell it, hey, the script should last 4.5 minutes. It's a video about this. In that regard, I like it,
Yeah.
but I don't use it for I don't use AI for images very much.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like some of the stuff that we're using an artist depiction is probably good to use just to see
Yeah,
a visual idea. So yeah,
and
I
then
could see that.
I heard YouTube is kind of starting to hammer down a little bit on AI use.
Yeah, yeah, they are something about if you use too much AI, you may not be able to monetize the video.
Monetize it.
Yeah.
I haven't
Um,
even started monetizing anything on it.
the only thing I monetized is my book. I wrote a book, Journey Through the Origins of History, and it
Wonderful.
actually went bestseller and stuff. So I was actually
Wonderful.
happy about that. Yeah, I was actually
Yay.
yeah, so, yeah, and
Well done, bro.
it. Like I said, a lot of you guys had inspired me because when you had went out there and I can't remember your exact words when you showed the film, the snippet. And I'm not going to give it nothing too in depth about it, but when you said the feeling of being there is different than reading, I can't remember exactly how you put it in those words, but something like the feeling of being there versus reading the book itself made you understand why this is the
Yeah,
location or something
yeah,
like that. I can't remember the exact
absolutely. I
words.
know
So.
exactly what you mean. It's when I started. Um, I didn't. I mean, now I live here, and I've been living here 6.5 years. But I've been traveling here for this project for close to 9 years, and that's exactly right. I would read this book, and I would come to these territories, this land, and I would be like, "Holy smokes, man! This is what he was talking about." And you get like goosebumps because you're on location somewhere, and he's talking about these, for example, uh, oceanfront cities that span the coastline, and we're finding
Mm,
these ruins of oceanfront cities spanning the coastline, and you're there touching this little piece of fragment of rock, and you're thinking, "Good Lord, I'm
mm,
somehow involved," and it's this almost tangible. It's like tangible. It's like if you could touch a ghost,
mm,
you know. It's a
yeah,
fantastic feeling. There's just that feeling
yeah,
of adventure. I don't care if you're looking for Atlantis or you're someone who likes to climb buildings and jump with a parachute. do that kind of thing, which I wouldn't do it. I dive with sharks, but the whole jumping out of a plane thing, I'm cool.
Well,
But the
let me
sense
ask
of
you
adventure.
but yeah, and you said adventure, and I like to call it journey. So that's a
Great,
good
I
way
love
to
it.
find a happy. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So that's a great
Yeah,
medium for both of us. You know, the adventure and the
yeah.
journey. I mean, it plays good to each other. But how did this come about for you? Like, how did you come on to say, man, I got to find where
So
Atlantis is at?
so I well, if you want the whole story, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
I had I had studied archaeology in university in Greece. So long story short, my father's job took us all over the world when I was a kid. So we would spend 4 years there, 5 years there, 4 years there, and so I grew up mostly in Europe, in Italy, Switzerland, and England, and then Abu Dhabi in the '90s, where I went to high school, and uh, and so before finishing university in America, which I did in Northern California, I studied in Athens, and it was kind of my father was an educator. He came from universities, and so his he knew the University of American College of Greece, and my sister was going to study there, and so he said, "Why don't you go study there as well, and then finish off in California?" And I said, "Sure, all right." So I went to Athens, and what are you going to do when you're studying in Athens? You're going to study archaeology, why? Of course. And it was super cool because we got to participate and study at some of these really ancient Greek sites, Minoan sites, and that really was the thing that kind of, and who didn't grow up loving Indiana Jones? You know, we all whenever I'm down or whenever I'm I put that movie on. You know,
yeah.
and so that's kind of what started my whole interest in archaeology. Then I ended up moving to California. I got a job right away at 20th Century Fox, where I worked for about 6 years. Then I worked with a studio called Mod Studios. We worked with Disney for a few years, doing animation and special effects and visual effects supervisor. Um, and it was about 10 years ago now. About 10 years ago, I kept in touch. I kept in touch with this group of archaeologists. I was always watching shows and keeping in touch with a group of people who would travel and say, "Hey, we're gonna go to Egypt. We're gonna go over here. You want to go? You want to go?" So I ended up moving to Europe. Um, I didn't actually move to Europe. I was in California, but my parents who were living in Italy called me, and my mother wasn't well. She was something had happened with a sudden illness, and I couldn't believe it. I went to Italy the very following day that they called me, and she's in a coma. I walk into the hospital. I see her. I fall on the floor. You know, I collapse, and I hold her hand for 2 hours, and she passes away. In the same month, my father had a stroke. And I was thinking, oh boy, man, really,
Mhm.
man, when it rains, it rains, you know.
Yeah.
And my father was my best friend, and he was considerably older than my mother. He was about 18 years older than my mother. And I thought to myself, okay, all right, pause. Let me just do one thing. Let me take 6 months off work. So I call my partners in California, and I said, listen, my mom just suddenly died, and my father's had a stroke. So I'm not going to be sending my dad to an old folks home. You know, he's
Mhm.
my best friend. I'm going to look after him. And I figured within 6 months, I'd have an idea of his state and whether I was going back with him to California or whatever. And in that time, actually within a few months, this group of archaeologists and researchers that it was a group I was involved with online, and there was a lady by the name of, if you look her up, she was a fascinating woman. I became very good friends with her. She passed away sadly, but her name was Carmen Bolter, and she had done a very cool documentary, which I thoroughly enjoyed, a series called, I think it was called The Pyramid Code. And I remember really hitting it off with her. And she said to me, "Look, you're in Italy." She was from Canada. She goes, "Look, I'm flying out to meet a group of researchers in southern Spain." And that's how it all started. That's how it all started. That was almost 10 years ago. Now, that at the time, that had nothing to do with Atlantis. Nothing to do with Atlantis. I came to Spain and subsequently met my current scanning partners. We have two scanning partners, one in Spain called Prisma Scanning Technologies, great guys, Alejandro and Sergio, who do our underwater scanning. And then in England, we have Merlin Burrows, who are I'm one of their partners, and they're great friends of mine, great group. And that was founded by my dear mentor Timothy Akers. And one thing led to another. Within the first 8 months, we went to Egypt a couple times. We were investigating a place called Hawara, which is the lost labyrinth of Hawara. A very fascinating project. I had met a Belgian gentleman named Louis de Cordier, who had done some research at this lost labyrinth in 2008. And what we did was we scanned, Merlin Burrows did some scanning of the Hawara pyramid, which is an ongoing project. That's a very interesting one. And from there, the very following month, I'm diving on the coast of the North Sea in England, recovering a shipwreck. And it's not just any shipwreck; it's a freaking awesome story. It was let's go back to 1759, was it? I'm having a brain fart, but I think it was around 1759. I'll have to look it up. It was called the Bonhomme Richard. I don't know if you were ever military.
Yep.
John Paul Jones was considered the first admiral of the U.S. Navy, and of course they have a Bonhomme Richard now, which is a big vessel. But the original one was a galleon, which was gifted to the early Americans by the French. And John Paul Jones, who was actually Scottish, and his group of the English would call them pirates, but the Americans, we call them heroes. They sailed this boat into British waters and entered into a battle with a frigate, with a fleet, and they got shot and right away killed about 19 guys. And their ship started catching fire and sinking. And John Paul Jones, in true pirate style movie, put his boat up against the British boat. They swung over, won the battle, and sailed off in the English boat called the Serapis. So there was a story. There were writings about where this ship was seen burning down. There were records of where it burnt down, and so what we do is we take into consideration all the elements possible, from geological changes to the coastline. It's on a cliff, so you imagine this cliff is kind of falling into the water now and again. Pieces, chunks fall off, and so you kind of do a geological survey. You do a historical research where you determine there were people on land in this location, in this little town, that said that they saw X amount of X clicks offshore, the burning boat. So putting all that stuff together, we then go and we do these scans of the coastline. And sure enough, Tim found the ruins of the Bonhomme Richard. And I, along with my little brother, Chris, Heapy, we were the first guys in the water, and I got to give credit to our wonderful team of divers and Tim Yarrow, Timbo, Rich Keys, and I think we've dived there now 50 times and recovered hundreds of pieces of burnt timber and brass bolts and elements of the Bonhammer Shard itself. So it's been registered, and then we had a bunch of other projects going on at the same time. We had one from the Second World War, all utilizing the same approach. You know, you do good old fashioned research. It doesn't matter what the object is. It can be any kind of object, prehistoric all the way to Tim was very interested in the doomed MH370 flight. So that was that was more recent stuff. All the way to prehistoric. And so one day I was coming out of the water and Tim says to me, "Hey dude, do you like Andalusia, southern Spain?" And I said, "Who's not going to like southern Spain?" And there's where this whole thing started with Atlantis. It's not like I woke up one morning thinking I'm going to go look for Atlantis. It was just a proper subject. And the thing is, when he said it, I took it perfectly seriously, because by that time I'd already worked with Tim and Merlin Burrows for almost a year. And I knew that what they were doing was working. There's a small amount of time, maybe 15% of the time, where we locate something, an object in a field. Maybe we think it's what we want to look for. Let's say we're looking for an old church or temple somewhere, right? And we research it and bingo, there's something in a field. And so we do these satellite scans, and if it matches the dimensions and it generally has the look of what we're looking for, we go there, we get permissions. If it's on land, we fly our drones. If it's under the trees, we scan with LiDAR. If it's in the water, we have underwater scanning technologies. And there's a small percentage
scanning.
Yeah, I mean, like underwater, we use a multi-axis echo sounder, it's called.
Oh, so you ain't playing then.
We're not playing, dude. If there's a technology, if it exists, we're using it. Like,
that's good.
It's amazing.
That's good.
And there's a small percentage of the time maybe you show up and you get excited and you see there's an object there, because we wouldn't go anywhere if there isn't an object. And it turns out it's something totally different. Maybe it's something modern. That's okay. But 15% of the time, that's not too bad. The 85% of the time, it is actually something. In regard to the subject with this subject, Atlantis, it was completely different from anything else I'd done before with them, because it was not a single object. There were many single objects, and there was a tremendous amount of cross-referencing of research work. There was obviously errors that we made at the very beginning, which was fine as part of exploration and research. But there were just too many things that coincided with what Plato said, too many that could not be ignored, and they were outside of the written historical record. And so one thing led to another. I was coming here I was flying out from Italy every month for about a week for the first three years. We took 1 year off because Tim broke his leg and got cancer, sadly. But so we took 1 year off. And then in 2019, I said, screw it, I got to move out here. That's the only way to really, you've got to be there. And part of the reason is so many of our discoveries are underwater, and it's a very complicated coastline to dive at. This part of Cádiz, for the visibility and for very peculiar tidal phenomenons that it has. And it's not the kind of place where you can just say, "Oh, I'll go there for a week and maybe I'll throw in a day of diving." No.
Right.
I just got a call from our team, our dive team here. Great guys. My Spanish dive team. Quick shout out to them. Rafa Donato, Boris Martinez, Tete, and Luis. Great, wonderful guys. They basically they'll call and they'll say, "Hey, Sunday looks like it might be ideal because we got to wait for the winds. You got to wait for
Mm.
every condition to be just as perfect as it could possibly be." And even then, we often go out and you can't see in front of your hand.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
had asked you that question. You remember I asked you that question about
yeah, that's
one of
right.
the questions that was there. I said, how long does it actually take? And you can't just say, "Hey, I'm going to go tomorrow or next week." It's like
No,
you have to constantly look at the weather, look at the
constantly.
patterns, and everything like that because it has to be damn near not if perfect to be able to go and do what you need to do in that location. And it's not even just the matter of doing it in the perfect time and how long you have to do it in because sometimes you might only get a certain window in and you might only be able to
Exactly.
just do it then and you have to go back out and do it another piece by piece. It's almost like putting a puzzle together. It's only little pieces by
Exactly.
yeah.
It's
So
exactly exactly a puzzle. So let's say you've got your underwater ruins, right? And they span
mhm,
a couple kilometers. So let's and you as a diver, you're this big, you're a little tiny person, right?
mhm.
And you've got one dive tank, or it maybe two. One of our guys has two, which will give you. I drink my air pretty quick, so I think if I get 45 minutes under the water, I'm pretty lucky. And each time you go back, it's like you said, it's like a puzzle. So let's say the last time you went in and you started on this corner and you made your way down this way and then back because in 45 minutes swimming like a little frog, you're not going to go that far. You're going to go maybe 100 meters or less. So then the next time we go dive, we start at the same spot, but maybe this time we go in the other direction, slowly building this puzzle. And it was what had happened there was very fascinating. So um, initially, for the first few years, we had found some things under the water, but the majority of what we were identifying were structures that were embedded in soil throughout the whole coastline and throughout the entire area of Andalusia, concentrated in the province of Cadiz. Andalusia is like a state, and it's the biggest state in Spain. And Cadiz is one of the provinces within Andalusia. Just to give you an idea. And so we were finding this concentration of prehistoric, undocumented, man-made structures all over the coastline, buildings, walls, settlements, and one and then we have a whole set of discoveries out in the ocean. There's an island called Sal Medina, and there's another island called Santi Petri. All of these places have remnants of extremely ancient man-made settlements, man-made structures, um, which are very difficult to study in many cases because the province of Cadiz has been continuously lived in since prehistoric times. And even though there are regular tsunamis here, we're on a fault line. The tsunamis occur every 600 to 1,000 years, and they're very serious ones. I mean, the last serious one was in 1755, and it killed a bunch of people. And there were written documents because 1755 relatively isn't that long ago; it's a couple hundred years ago. Um, the There were documents of people who didn't know what tsunamis were, but they saw the waters retreating. You know how the waters retreat before a tsunami happens? And they said that they saw a city emerge from under the waters. So the problem that we faced with the discoveries on land was that because it's been an area that has been lived in over and over and over again. At first, it was the ancient Iberian tribes of Spain. You had Tartessians, you had then the Phoenicians, then you had the Romans, then you had the Visigoths, then you had the Arabs. Each one of those civilizations that comes in, if they see the ruins of old buildings, they usually dismantle them and reuse the bricks, reuse the stones.
Yeah,
Happens
that's usually what
everywhere.
most people. Yeah,
It's
most
what they
people used
do.
to do that. Yeah,
If
I
it's
mean,
there,
recycle them basically.
recycle. If it's there, if it's available, makes your life a lot easier.
Right.
But it makes our life harder as archaeologists because um, it's it's like many of the sites that we have been plundered, and so the only reason we're able to identify stuff often is because of the technologies we have from above. Maybe from the ground you can't quite make out because everything's been pulled apart, but then when you go up to the sky and you look down with your drones or scans, and you go, hey, no, look, this is definitely a rectangular set of structures, blah 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 blah. So what we have under the water, however, wasn't plundered. It wasn't pillaged because it was covered over in one awful event. I can only imagine from the scans that we have, it's serious trauma showing that these giant walls tumbled inwards. Um, so it's somewhat sat there undisturbed, and because of what we talked about earlier, that how the visibility is so complicated, and there's only a few days where you can really go out, and um, there were I the best stories you get are from like old fishermen, and they have these old stories of
Yeah, because they got their stories. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm a
And
fisherman too. I go out there and
I
fish a lot
love
too,
fishing, dude. Man,
and just to keep yourself entertained, and
it's
that's why
great.
I said mythologies. That's probably how some of the mythologies started, just to keep some people entertained.
Absolutely. When I was a kid, I was in the fishing, and there was one day of clear water, and I saw these things. You always hear these stories. You al- you
Yeah.
know, you
But
also
they're
hear
always based on some type of truth, though. That's the thing.
always.
They're always because if you look up at the definition of myth, it just means something that's a traditional oral story. I mean, one of the definitions does mean that it's fiction, but in most cases, I have dictionaries all around me and stuff like that, and I look at it, and the first one is always just a traditional oral story. That's all it really
Traditional
means.
oral
And
stories.
yeah,
They were the ones that lasted forever because
yeah, people
parents
used to
would
have to
tell it.
remember them.
You had to remember them. And
Yeah.
I sometimes I think about like pre-television, pre-internet. You're in the house. We used to have board games, but go back further, and you think about some
Play outside.
play outside, or you have a family. They live in the countryside, and
Yeah.
they're working in the fields all day, and then they come home at night for the nice dinner with the whole family. They're gonna go and do their version of entertainment, which is gonna be telling stories, and it's gonna be the same. I remember when I was a kid, really young, and my dad would tell us bedtime stories, and I would often say, Dad, tell us the same one again. Tell us the same one again.
Mm.
So if there's one story that you really liked, you would hear it over and over again. And who's not going to like the story of Atlantis, of a city that was destroyed in a giant cataclysm because the gods became angry with humans for their insolence and their
Yeah, yeah.
greed,
For their wicked. Well, one of the words that always sticks out to me is their wickedness.
their
That's what sticks out
wickedness.
to me. Yeah, their
It's
wickedness.
very interesting. And there's always, like you said earlier, there's always a grain of truth to it.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing about this project. Talking about grains of truth. There are people who I always, the word Atlantis always scares people. So I always like to, I always like to say to people that what we are finding are the remains of an ancient Atlantic culture.
Yeah.
An ancient Atlantic culture. That's what we're finding. Do I like the word Atlantis? Of course I do. But when people get afraid, they go, "So you think you found Atlantis?" I think what we are finding are the ruins of an ancient Atlantic culture, which coincides exactly with Plato says. You
Yeah.
want to call it Atlantis? Call it Atlantis. Um, but the one thing there's you can imagine, because of my work, I've read this thing and I have all these different versions, and I put my notes in
Yeah.
there, and I scribble down all the notes.
Yeah.
I've read this thing over with great pleasure 150, 200 times. And each time you remind yourself of one of the many details. He's got 50 pages. It's almost nothing. You could read it
Yeah.
in a short time. And yet, in these 50 pages of these two texts, the Timaeus and Critias, he manages to put so much detail that whenever there are people who suggest that, no, Plato was talking allegorically, and he was sort of making up this story, uh, it's highly unlikely for a bunch of different reasons. Part of the reason is the details are so specific. He's so specific. He says, outside of the Straits of Heracles, in the region of Gades, at the time of Plato writing this, 2,400 years ago, in the region we know as Gades, there was this great capital of this great empire, which controlled the majority of the Mediterranean. However, its capital city was located, and he starts telling you all these details. He tells you about where it was. He tells you about the names. That's hard to make up. He didn't make up names like Gades, and he certainly didn't make up the name Atlantic Ocean. So there
Yeah.
are etymological roots that he's utilizing that he didn't make up. So whenever somebody suggests that no, it was a made up story, no, no, it wasn't. Um, then he tells you all about it, and of course he tells you about the wealth of Atlantis. He talks about the richness, the wealth, and we have some of the oldest mines in the world here. He
Yeah.
talks he talks about this great plain. Gives you measurements. He talks about this inland sea. He talks about a huge harbor wall. He talks about this capital city, which was concentric and circular in nature, um, designed as if it was cut with a lathe. So he describes it as having had fountains of fresh spring water, cold and warm. All of these things coincide with what exists here. He talks about these 3 or 4 different types of animals that made up a big part of this empire. The horse. The horses of Andalusia are the oldest breed of horse in the world. In fact, all American horses originated from the Andalusian horse because they were shipped out
Mm.
from here. And he talks about the bull. This is crazy. Like, imagine bullfighting tradition here in Spain. It's super old.
Yeah.
It's
That's
unbelievable. And the oldest breed of bull is from here as well. And it's like prehistoric, it's super old. Then he talks about these elephants. And you think, well, Andalusia doesn't have elephants. But wait. Andalusia had a thriving prehistoric ivory trade, and they had colonies of elephants, and paleontologists have discovered many footprints of elephants in this area, but not just one type of elephant, 3 types, including the Asian elephant,
Wow.
which means that there was cross-continental trade,
Yeah.
which means they had shipping in prehistoric times, which means that this empire had shipping at its heart. And then he talks about the 4th animal or insect. He says the honey. The honey was delicious. The bees. The honey we have here is exquisite. I'll send you a jar. It's delicious. It's
Oh,
like
I would love that.
it's like this just pure. You can't find it in America. You know, it's like this pure.
And I love honey too.
Oh my God. And it's got these flavors of the flower and I think, wow, he's describing Andalusia today, minus the elephants. Then he talks about the different metals that their cities were coated in gold, silver, tin. This is curious. Tin, bronze,
Yeah, I'm about to
and
write that
or
down.
and orichalcum. This mythical material. It was a shiny metallic red material, and they would paint their buildings in it, which makes you get this impression that Plato's describing what would have been a stupendously beautiful cityscape. It must have been, and he says the coastline was filled with harbors and cities and life and people and commerce, and it was a very active place. And he talks about the different people in society, that there were the sort of the priests, and then there were the warriors, and it's all just, and that part of it, when he's talking about the social structure, almost sounds like almost like an ancient Hindu kind of a thing, where the warriors are the warriors and you have the craftsmen are the craftsmen. You know, it's a very interesting, it's a very, very interesting story that he tells, and it's so detailed and it's so particular that it makes it next to impossible, once you've really read through these texts, to think that it's made up. It's just,
Like I said, I've read Plato's books, the collection. Like I said, I have it here on my Kindle. I love
fantastic.
I love his information because of the simple fact that he's telling you, you know, not just to believe what he says, but he's also giving you enough information for even just the people of today just to go and, you know, like I said,
Absolutely.
go and do
Exactly.
their own due diligence and research. You know, one thing that I like to do, like I said, what I respected you the most when you showed that film at Cosmic Summit was the very first thing you did before you did anything else was you pulled the book out and you showed the Penguin Classic. You didn't show that one. You had the Penguin Classics version. Now I love Penguin Classics. I have a lot of books from Penguin Classics.
I have it right here. I have it right. Hang on, where is it? I have, you know, you have to have, because, you know, imagine this text is, you know, thousands of years old.
Yeah.
And it's been translated and transliterated 1,000 times. And I like this one here because it's kind of the goodies of everything put together. I also have another version, not in hard copy, but in it's the original Greek version, which has been recently translated, and that one's got a lot of stuff that this one doesn't. There's one.
They're all there. You have to. I tell people all the time too, that you can't just read one version. You have to read multiple different versions 100%. Because everybody's going to take their own translations, their own theories, and even their own narratives that they want to help create and put 100%. It in their books. And you have to separate all that by reading multiple. Me personally, my one of the things that I like to do is I like to read 3 different versions, 3 different times. So every book that I've read is 3 times, and every version that I'm reading is 3 times, just so that way I can go in there. Like I'm like you. Let me show you.
And you notice that sometimes you'll read one, and you know you're in the same chapter or the same paragraph, but somehow the words are ever so slightly different.
Yeah.
You notice that?
This book right here, I like this book because it Morals and Dogma talks Albert a lot Pike. About history. Yeah, Albert Pike. I like his stuff because when you go to the origins of a lot of this stuff, you have to go with Godfrey Higgins, you have to go with Albert Pike with the symbolism and all that other stuff. And this is what I like to do. I like to put all these tabs.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, bro. That is due diligence right there.
Yeah, that's a lot of tabs. And you know, awesome. On my Kindle, there's this section that's called I guess you could call it like highlights or annotations and stuff like that. Yeah. See, it's taking it. on here. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, there you go. That's the highlights. That's the highlights and
Oh yeah,
and everything else.
I love
So
Kindle. I have one
yeah,
sitting around here somewhere.
yeah. Well, this is the Kindle Scribe. So this is I like this one a lot more because it comes with a little pen that you can
Dude,
put
I
little
was gonna
notes
ask
on.
you. I have just a little Kindle. That's a big one.
Yeah, I have another one right here too.
They're super cool.
I
They're
have the
super cool.
paperweight one. I have the
Oh
paperweight
yeah.
ones. The little one that you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Classic.
I have
Man.
I have my wife bought me the Kindle Scribe. So
Oh
I don't
yeah.
you remember the composition books back in the day, right?
Of course. Of course.
Yes. So I bought the cover for the Kindle.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, that's so cool. I no, it's an important thing to it's an important thing to always have, especially like I mean, for example, if you're going to read a new book that just came out, let's say a Harry Potter, it's one version and that's what's put out. But in
Hmm.
this case with Plato, it's 2,400 years old, and
Yeah.
God knows how many people have gone through it. And there was one fascinating version that I have, which is a PDF version. I'll send it to you. And in that one, there was a little bit that I didn't have in this one. Um, and basically, the story is so crazy, dude. The story is so crazy because it starts off where um, it's not Plato's narrative, really. Plato's, like you said, we're repeating stories, right?
Hmm.
Plato's telling the story of his great 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 relative Solon, who lived, I believe, about 120, 130 years prior to Plato. And Solon was the famed lawmaker of Athens. He was a very respected man. He wasn't the kind of guy that would just write rubbish. And that's what gives it more credibility as well. And essentially, Solon tells this story that he had gone to Egypt and he had visited the ancient priests of Egypt in the province in Egypt of Sais. And you can imagine 2,500 years ago, Egypt was very different culturally and whatnot. And these ancient priests of Egypt, who are probably the closest descendants or ancestors of the modern day Coptics of Egypt, they tell Solon this crazy story. They tell him, you Greeks are like kids. You don't even know your own history. You don't know that outside of the Straits of Heracles, there was this grand empire that were your ancestors. But not only were they your ancestors, they were our ancestors. So he was telling Solon that these people from Atlantis, were not only the ancestors of the Greeks, but also of the Egyptians. And
Hmm.
he says, don't you know we also revere Heracles? And I thought, what the heck? I've never heard of the ancient Egyptians revering Heracles. Because you always think that it's Ra and it's Thoth and it's all of the Egyptian deities.
Hmm.
But no, I think they had a lot more in common. Speaking of which, our focus on the first series is the discoveries we've made in Andalusia, in Cádiz, what we consider the capital province of this great Atlantic culture. But Plato says it very clearly. They controlled the majority of the Mediterranean, from from the Straits of Heracles and the Atlantic all the way to Greece and Egypt and the Tyrrhenian Sea, which is the Italian peninsula. Um, but another curious clue, and the reason I say that is because in our second and third seasons, we expand the discoveries to show, hey, look at all
Hmm.
this stuff in Malta, look at all this stuff in Sardinia, look at all this stuff in the Azores. and the
Yeah.
Canary Islands.
Yeah.
Those people say to me, so what do you think about people who say it's in the Azores? Well, yes. What do you think about people that say that there's remains of this ancient culture in Italy, in Sardinia? Absolutely. What about Malta? What do you think all those prehistoric weird looking things are there? You know? So there's one little clue, but it's such an important clue. Plato says at the very beginning of a text, he says, as you're exiting the straits,
Mhm.
which everybody knew, there's debate as to how people say, well, no, they were talking about the straits. There's one debate I heard, which was very erroneous, but they were talking about how, no, the Straits of Heracles in Plato's times were actually considered the area between Sicily or Malta and Tunisia, because apparently the Greeks didn't navigate the entire Mediterranean. That's not true at all. In fact, the Greeks
Yeah,
had
they had the
cities.
whole thing.
They
Yeah.
had cities and settlements in Andalusia. There were Greek colonies here. So that's already been sort of dismantled. But he says something curious. He says, as when you exit the straits from the Mediterranean into the Atlantic, but not as to go to the opposite side of the of the Atlantic to where you get to the boundless continent. He knew of the Americas. So when the first conquistadors from Spain, who had come from literate families who read Plato, when they arrived in the Americas, they said, what the fuck? Plato was right. Plato was right. There was this place over here. So
Yeah.
that's another fascinating subject that I haven't really gotten into yet, but I do get into it in our episode, our third season. And the reason also I'm saying this as well, I want to go back to the Azores and the Canary Islands. This is a fascinating set of coincidences, if you want to call them coincidences. People say they don't really exist, but Christopher Columbus sailed out of here. Magellan sailed out of here around the world. Christopher Columbus to the Americas. I when I moved here, I'd already moved here for a very peculiar thing. Atlantis. Oh my God, that's pretty nuts. Okay. I never realized there was a whole set of other things that were really mind-blowing here that I didn't know. I didn't know Christopher Columbus had sailed directly out of Huelva and Sanlúcar de Barrameda, which are these two towns right here where we live. And there's a secret to it. Back in that era, the high technology, the top secret tech, were maps.
Okay.
If you had a set of proper maps, reliable maps, and nobody else had, you knew how to get to places, and you knew how to. You had, like let's say there were mines full of wealthy, rich metals, and only
Mhm.
you and your team knew where it was. Well, you would keep that secret.
All right.
And
So let me verify. So you're saying maps is the advanced technology that the Atlanteans might have had.
well, no, this is for sure. For sure. But
Okay.
during Columbus's time.
Okay.
So
Okay. During Columbus's time.
during
Okay. So I just
Columbus's
wanted to
time.
clarify that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
because that does make sense. If you the way you put it, if you do have the knowledge where something important is at, and you're the only one that knows it, you would definitely keep it a secret.
I mean,
Yeah.
imagine, the Armada. It was the greatest fleet in the world, the greatest superpower in the world.
Yeah.
And as a result, or part of that story, is that the palace that we have here in town, gorgeous palace, it's called the Palace of the Dukes of Medina Sidonia. They they had they have the oldest archives in Europe, and a huge part of those archives are maps. So here's where I'm
Okay.
going with this. Here's an interesting little set of of truths and curiosities. Columbus knew, he knew how to get to America because he knew that there was, so you have the Straits of the exit of Europe, the Straits of Gibraltar, and then it goes into the Atlantic. And if you keep going and going, you get to the American continent. And then way before that, you have on the right, out at sea, you have the Azores Islands, which belong to Portugal. And then on the left, you have the Canary Islands, which belong to Spain. Christopher Columbus knew that there, or he knew, or by chance, or whatever it might be, but he knew that there was an underwater river, an underwater current that went on one direction. It went past the Canaries, but on the way back, you had to go past the Azores. So here's the logic. The logic is he knew that was top secret, the only guys that knew it, but then obviously became a trade, and suddenly all these ships started going out there using the same route. But what if that route had been known way back when? And it makes total sense, if that is the case, that this great Atlantic culture that we're talking about would have had settlements in the Azores and in the Canary Islands. So it's a very fascinating thing. I think there's a whole chunk of that part of the history that's been forgotten, and we're now rediscovering.
Yeah, and it's up to people like you and me and everybody else who are reading these books and trying to put these puzzle pieces together, because it's very important. I've heard so many different theories about where Atlantis is at. And of course, it says, there's multiple places, but the capital, there's one place that is the most, where basically the capital of these individuals at. And some people say it was in Egypt. One of the most confusing things that a lot of people argue about is the word island. They sit there and say, well, it says island, it's an island. So,
island in Greek, Naxos, actually means, or Noxos, means two things. It means island, but it also means peninsula.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, what is a peninsula really? It's an island that's connected at one part.
Yeah.
And what is the Iberia? What is Spain? Peninsula.
And
how big is it? Pretty darn big.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like, because see, a lot of people they and that's why I said the word narrative earlier, because a lot of people would read something and they'll say, "Oh, it says island," and they'll pick only one meaning of what island means for their narrative, and won't sit there and tell you that, okay, this island could mean many things. It could mean, surrounded by water. It could mean,
exactly,
land connected, surrounded by water. It could mean a land between rivers. I've heard people say that. But what does it say in the writing system that you're reading it from? Like, so we're going to go to the Greeks, because of course Plato was the one who wrote about Atlantis. That's the earliest and known recording text that we can go to that has anything to do with Atlantis is his. So anytime somebody has to discuss anything about Atlantis, you have to at least read the translations from him. And of course, you can't just read one person's, like I said, and you agreed. That we should definitely go out there and read multiple. And just like you said, you have multiple different versions. So that way you can get a better understanding, because when some person says here may not be the same thing that somebody says here, or it could be the same thing, but it could be more detailed and phrased a different way to help you better understand. We word things differently. Speech is very important. Communication is very important, and it can lead us to misunderstandings and miscommunication and so on and so forth. But what's more important is not just the communication, but the boots on ground. That's what I call it. You said earlier if I was in the military or not. Yeah, I was actually in the military. And the reason why I say it's a journey for me is because, and I called my book "Journey Through the Origins of History," is because I've always been into history. I've always been a fan of it. Ever since I was a little kid, I
Yeah.
didn't care about anything else but history. And I used to watch a lot of documentaries. I never really read books. Now I've read thousands of books, just like you said, a book that's 50 pages is considered a book. So if you read 1,050-page books, I'm not just saying that I read 50-page books, but I've read a lot. Of course, I just showed you Albert Pike book, what kind of books I read. But even if you read 50-page 1,000 books, you're still reading something. And but for me, watching documentaries and stuff like that, I was a big fan of that. Like that's what I used to go to,
I
is
love
watch
it.
documentaries. So I had high standards for documentaries. You had to show me the sources. You had to tell me where I can find this information at for myself. Tell me where exactly I can read it for myself. And that's why when you showed your film, when you pulled out that book, I was like, look, hey, he ain't got to prove nothing else to me. He already told me, he got it from the book. He went and did his boots on ground. And that's what I call it. Yeah, so that's what I call it. And that's why I told you, for me here, I'm boots on ground for my local history. I call myself the local historian, even though I'm not
Dude, that's
just doing
awesome.
just my state. I'm doing, across the Americas, and plan on traveling
Yeah,
across abroad and stuff like that, and doing things like that. But
that's
you know,
awesome.
if
You know,
if you don't,
you remind me of when you talk about this. I had when I was a kid and I was in school, I had a history teacher. God bless him, but he was the most he was terrifying. He looked like Saruman. He would come into with English accent. He'd come into the classroom dressed in a black suit, and and we all had to stand up when he walked in. And we sat down, and he never spoke a word. And his whole way of teaching class, I'll never forget. There were two boards, and on one board he would start writing from memory. He would start writing very small writing, and he would fill in the whole board, and then we'd go on to the next board, and we had time to copy down copy. That was all we were doing, was copy. That was his way of teaching. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to like history. I'm never going to the subject of history because of how it was taught. And it wasn't till later, till now, boots on the ground, like you say, that it really came into a different uh, perspective for me. It's so exciting. And you talk about documentaries, and I came from the world of visual effects for feature films.
yeah.
And I, to be honest with you, I started to get a little dismayed with the film industry in Los Angeles. And I tend to see a trend. I mean, it's been a while since I've watched anything really good new.
Yeah.
However, documentaries, there's so many good ones coming out. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking to myself, that's something I could dedicate myself to. Because if I can make quality material with purposeful material, it's fantastic. So this documentary phase of my life has been, to me, the most exciting. There's no question
You
about
know
it.
what? I'm gonna send
Documentaries
you my
they're documentaries. They're like the books of the film world.
That's you, this. I'm glad you said that. I'm gonna
Mhm.
send you a link to my Rumble account because I just created a
Yeah,
Rumble account. So I'm going to show you. I have a YouTube account also, but I started a Rumble account, and That's where I'm going to these different places, right?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
um, um, you know, going to these museums and filming myself. I'm gonna send it to you after this. I want you, if you could you check it out and give me some pointers on it?
Of
Because
course I will.
I don't really have a lot of equipment. I bought a PC. I have second monitor. I have all kinds
Perfect.
of different kinds of equipment around me that I just bought because this is my passion. I don't do this to
It's
get paid.
wonderful.
I don't
Good
mind.
for
I
you.
have a website called
Yeah,
rebirthoftheword.com that I started with just one article, and I just
perfect.
slowly built up it based on what I've read and on my YouTube channel I actually have a series called what I've read what I've learned from reading these books or reading this book, And basically, it's just me taking a book, like I showed you the Albert Pike book, saying, hey, this is the book that I've just currently read. This is the information in it. And I kind of create a PowerPoint slide also to go with it of what I've learned with it. And I go through each tab that I showed you on there and say, hey, this is what I learned from this tab. And then I
Perfect.
expand on it because of information that I've learned from other stuff. You know what I'm
Yeah, yeah,
saying?
sure,
So
sure, 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 sure.
I still have encyclopedias here. Somebody, I was on Facebook one day and they wanted to give away some free encyclopedias, so I drove an hour
What?
away and picked them up. So yeah, from
Man, that
Britannica.
is so cool. What?
So
That is
that
awesome.
that's how deep I am into this. I'm very passionate about it. I really only
Good
share
for
it because
you.
I like it. And that's the only thing that I did monetize was my book. Of course, I sell it on Amazon and stuff like that. But I
There's
really want to
nothing wrong
just
with making a living.
yeah, and that's the thing. That's why I created my Rumble account because I feel like that would be easier for me to monetize because YouTube can be iffy sometimes,
Yeah,
with their
yeah.
guidelines and stuff like that.
Like for
So just to
example,
be on this,
with YouTube, I try to. I'm not the best at do, but I try to keep it updated and put new content
mm,
in once or twice a week. Um, and the one of the music sources that I use is a company I've been working with for years. They're wonderful. They got libraries and libraries but their music that I usually use, it's paid, but I use it for my documentaries. But then when I take a snippet out and I take, let's say, a chunk of maybe a 5 minute snippet, and I
mhm.
put it into YouTube, YouTube says we can't monetize this because it's got copywritten material, and that's okay. I haven't gotten to. I think at this point, I'm with YouTube. I'm more just getting material out. I want people to see what we do, and but when the day comes, and since we did the Cosmic Summit, I've had quite a few really cool podcasts, and I asked these questions to my
Yeah,
various colleagues.
you did one with Mike and Dave. I
I
actually
did,
hang out
yeah.
with them. Me and
Oh,
Mike
super
and
cool.
yeah, me and Dave actually one of my first videos that I did for my Rumble account was with him. We went to Rock Eagle Mound and Rock Hawk Mound in Georgia. We
Oh
only
wow,
stayed like 3 or 4 hours away from each other, so we met up
dude,
at a
that's so cool.
location. Yeah, and we actually did one. Like I said, I'm about to send it to you right now because
Yeah,
it's interesting you say that because I watched that video that you had with Mike and Dave.
it was
So and
cool.
I
They're nice.
yeah
They're
yeah
super good guys there.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
you
And
deserve it. You deserve it, man, because you do
uh,
have that knowledge out there, and you definitely have to share.
thank you, brother.
What you know
You
out there.
know, it's been really weird. It's been almost 10 years since we started on this. Tim, who was my mentor and my dear friend, ended up passing away with cancer. My father passed away here in Spain. I moved here with him. Um, then my other business partner, Nora, bless her soul, I was doing a series with her in Italy, passed away. Um, my cat passed away. So I just, it's been not easy. That's for sure.
Yeah
It's
yeah
been difficult, and it's been something, but I really believe in what we're doing. I believe in it, and I believe that what we're doing is important because
yeah
more than anything, if you put the whole myth and suspense of Atlantis aside,
yeah
um, the discoveries are so important because they tell a story of an ancient past that we have as human beings that is far more interesting than what we've been, the sort of sterile washed down version that we hear, that we started in some caves and we were drawing in this
yeah
with
yeah
sticks in the mud. That's not what it was. Humankind has had chapters throughout the eons of incredible um, advancements and incredible, and those things remain in our consciousness. There's a very fascinating subject which I like a lot. It's one of the themes in science right now that I, whenever I see an article about it, I kind of I get attracted to it. It's the topic of genetic memory. So
Yeah, now you're talking
it,
my
it
language.
I love it. I love it. And it explains so many things which prior to this study, this field of study, it was sort of something that was relegated to the realm of fantasy or ghosts or the supernatural. But the concept is like, let's say I have my mother's nose and my father's ears, right? Well, what do I have deeply rooted somewhere that might come from a great great uncle? Like maybe I have his temperament. This article was talking about, it was so interesting, it was talking about how genes work. And I might have, obviously my sisters and I are related. However, just the way that genes work, my sister might be the descendant of Cleopatra, but I might not be. But I might be the descendant of somebody else, and she might not be.
Yeah.
So it's really bizarre. So I was thinking to myself, I took it a step further, and there are a lot of ancient theologies and ancient religions that have the theme of reincarnation, or the theme of multiple lives. And then you hear people talking these stories of, I remember a past life. And I think to myself, I'm a fairly down to earth guy. I don't often, however, I think to myself, could there maybe be an ounce of truth that somehow in the mystical, magical, infinite wisdom or stuff that genes are made out of, could it be that at some other point, some guy that wasn't really you because you're you here now, but it was you in some genetic sense, but in a completely different era, thousands of years apart, had an experience. They know that extremely uh, hard experiences, strong experiences can actually affect your DNA.
Yeah.
And so what if some great 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 uncle that you had once had some crazy experience, and it remained embedded in his makeup. And since you and I are alive right now, and my wife and I don't have any kids right now, but when we do have kids, that'll be the final branch on, and then when they have more kids, the final branch on this infinite tree that we call mankind, humankind. Could it be that explains why perhaps when I came here, I had this affinity for this place? There was a sense of like, I'm drawn to it. And could it be
Yeah,
that when
your attraction, your aura was attracted to it.
you're attracted to it? And when you go to you're on your trips and you go on an expedition to the mountain, the mountains that you just talked to me about, and you have this, and you find something, you see something, and it's just this sense of attraction. I tend to like this idea. Maybe it's this sense that I'm trying to justify something supernatural in a scientific way, but why
Mm.
not? If you can explain something scientifically in a way that would previously have been thought of as only supernatural jargon, um, it's pretty interesting because you start taking stuff more seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I'm
always say,
rambling.
no, 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 no. That makes perfect sense because I say a lot all the time that science catches up with our theories and mythologies. We don't. You mentioned lidar. You mentioned, all these different types of scans. You wouldn't know some of these places without that.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
see things on the ground from the height that you're at, but when you get that bird's eye view, you get a better perspective of
dude.
what's out there, and that's what's important. And I think that's what a lot of people are forgetting to realize is that Yeah, science can't prove like that there's life after death because they can't say, that you was this person 1,000 years ago. But there are definitely people who would say that they had memories of their past life and were able to prove it in many ways than more than one. And that's where the interest in theories and ideas comes from. I know that Japan right now, if they haven't already finished it, they're creating a pillow that can record your dreams. Now, a lot of people
What?
would have to, yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, it's crazy. They want to be able to record your dreams and then be able to, just like right now with your monitors and with my monitors in front of me, we will be able to watch our dreams. Now,
That's
people are
nuts.
able to lucid dream, which is basically controlling
That's
your
right.
dream. And I know you know about astral projection. And
Absolutely.
that
I
right there was said,
those flying
yeah,
dreams are my favorite. Did you've had those where you're floating,
yeah,
kind of flying?
yeah.
Have you ever noticed, like, the older you get, when you get one of those dreams, you can actually start to control it, and you can
Yeah, that's
start
lucid
to.
dreaming. Yeah.
It's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, that's lucid dreaming. That's lucid
I
dreaming.
love it.
When you can control your dreams, that is called lucid dreaming. And that's why
Amazing.
like a lot of the ancient texts they talk about that stuff. And that's where they get the mythologies. I know you was at Cosmic Summit, so you know about the Anuna / the Anunnaki. You've heard about them and all this other stuff. It's interesting that you talk about Atlantis the way you do, is because I'm a big fan, and my expertise is in the Sumerians, the Anuna / the Anunnaki. I study that like I study the back of my hand. I know it
Fantastic.
that very well, and I can tell
Phenomenal.
you a lot of people would tell you that the Anuna / the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru outside of Earth's atmosphere. That's what I'm pretty sure you've heard a lot. Well, like just like you, I like to grab the books and I like to actually read what the actual text say, what people are saying. And in these books, and I've posted it so many times, I've shared it so many times. You know, I, I'm sharing this information, and it basically says that they came from the depths of the sea. They came from the depths of the sea, and they came here to give us knowledge. Now, what you're doing is what you have to do is you're going within the depths of the sea. Now, this can be interpreted in so many different
Very
ways.
interesting.
That cataclysm that happened on Atlantis and that over flooded it and all this other stuff, that could have been their way of saying, hey, these individuals that had this ancient technology and this information, they came from what we know as the flooded waters now of Atlantis. There's these different pieces of puzzle that these people are telling through their story. And I know that the Sumerians, when they started their writing system, it started off with pictures. It didn't start off with what we know today. It's a pictographic script. This is
That's
any
right.
civilization. The Greek writing system started off as a type of pictographic script.
Great.
But it evolved into more of an alphabetical thing,
Right.
and
Yeah.
sometimes it could be a mixture of both. Some because they're trying to
100%.
do their
I
expertise, I guess.
Do you know, it's an incredible thing. The well, there's so many wonderful subject matters that you just brought up. I often think to myself, when I look at these hieroglyphs, and I think that, the advent of writing like cuneiform writing probably came along, just to simplify things in a commercial sense. So if you're selling a cart,
That's exactly what it was.
it's a lot easier just to go make little notches. How many tomatoes? Well, we got
We think
37.
alike.
You know what I mean? But when I look at hieroglyphs, I think to myself, could it be that you needed to be in a certain state of mind to actually interpret what these things are, the story they're telling you? It's absolutely incredible. And one other subject that you brought up was, we're talking about the Anunnaki. And if you look at every every ancient mythology, bar none, every ancient mythology has a handful of things in common. They all talk about a flood, all of them. They all talk about giants. So it's like giant. What are we talking about? Giant. When you say giant, I mean 6'5" or 12 feet tall. They all talk about these deities with long life, and I think to myself of the story of Noah. is actually an older story that in the Greek version, the Greek mythological version, the original version, he wasn't named Noah. It's the same exact story, but he was named Deucalion. Same story. God tells him he's going to destroy the world by way of a flood. He gives Noah or Deucalion 120 years to prepare to build this craft, to put all of these, and you think to yourself, wow, this guy was living that long. And I think to myself, well, and then you talk about the Anunnaki. It isn't it, and you talk about, let's talk about if you look at the Hindu gods, Krishna and Shiva, and they're not all that different in terms of I mean, different, yes, like maybe some of the Indian gods had the face of an elephant and multiple hands, but they all have this idea of these cosmic battles, beings with tremendously long life, and this cataclysm that almost wiped us out. Then the gods coming down and mingling with the human women and creating as giants and beasts as a result of their fornication. But it's a I really sometimes wish we lived a lot longer. I wish we lived 10,000 years.
Yeah,
I
you
wish,
know.
you know, I wish we
Yeah.
could, because we live such a short time.
I can't remember his name that passed away from the documentary.
Timothy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Timothy. Yeah.
He was
Rest in peace,
so,
Timothy.
man, he was so, talk about an open mind.
Yeah.
He would, I, man, I, rare people sometimes you have the chance to meet a few people during your lifetime that really make an impact, and he was one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as much as I love what I do, it's a curious field, because I have friends who are archaeologists who are friends of each other and have been friends for years, and yet you ask one of them super close-minded and the other one super open-minded.
Yeah.
You might ask one archaeologist, what are your thoughts on Atlantis, and he won't even look at you. And then you ask his best friend, who's also an archaeologist, hey, what are your thoughts on Atlantis? And he'll say, hey, you know what? I've been looking into that, and there's some truth to this and that, blah blah blah. And Tim was an example of somebody who was just supremely open-minded and brilliant. And I'm absolutely lucky to have had such a mentor in my life. And then my father was my best friend, and when he was recovering from his stroke, he was such a supporter of what I'm doing. And when I had my heart failure, which was out of the blue, I didn't know that I had a genetically bad valve, called a bicuspid valve. I didn't know, but I always kept in shape my whole life. But there were certain things I never really loved. I never loved running,
Mhm.
and now I kind of get why.
Yeah, everybody was telling you, nah, you don't
Well,
need to run.
no, you don't need to run, bro. Just go to the gym and get a little swimming.
Yeah, just
But
get buff, man. Don't worry about that.
get
Make sure
buff.
you do leg day.
Oh, wait, leg day. But no, it
Yeah.
makes me realize that uh, I was lucky enough to hold the torch for this project and keep it going.
Mhm.
And now I'm very, very lucky, because our team is expanding. We have new partners, who we work
Mhm.
with, who are extremely well respected scholars. Um, Gentlemen like Manuel Pimentel, wonderful man, brilliant, and Pepe Orihuela. And these are scholars who have done their own, and my friend Gabriel Santana, these are scholars who have done their own research on Atlantis in this area for years. And then suddenly, when we all met, we realized there's a community going on. He's
Yeah.
done this, he's done that, he's done this. And suddenly you realize, good Lord, we're onto something big here. Um, it's like one of the and after my heart failure, I mean, knock on wood, my studio is made of wood, but I, there was a moment where I was in the hospital and I lost, because they had to drain a bunch of liquid from out of my heart. They ended up draining 15 kilos out of me, 15 liters of liquid that had accumulated around my heart and my chest, and I was coughing up blood, and I went from 100 kilos, 225 to 75 kilos. I lost about 50 pounds in a week. And I remember in that moment, my only thought was, my wife, I mean, she just was a trooper. She just looked after me and really took care of me. In Spain, I got to give my thanks to Spain, the medical system here. Even though every medical systems all have their flaws, they took care of me here, man. And the only thing I was thinking about when I looked at myself in that mirror, and I looked, plus I shaved my head, and I was wearing those hospital pajamas, and I just remember looking in the mirror thinking, God, man, where did I go? I just need to get past this. I got to get better because I have work to do. I really believe in what I'm doing is what we're doing here is really and truly, it's so important. It's so important. And not aside from the excitement, it's the one thing in life that is my true, I fucking love it, man. I love what I'm doing. And it makes me so happy. But when my dear friend and our manager, David, we went to, you might have met him. I think you might have met him in North Carolina. David came on board last year with us, and he's just terrific. He's a wonderful guy, brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and he's a writer, very good writer. He saw what we're doing and said, "Dude, this is the moment. This has to blow up. This has to blow up. It's not just some yet another guy who thinks he's found Atlantis. It's not that. It's a culmination of certain things that even 20 years ago didn't exist." That's another thing I think to myself. What are the chances that drones, that they've only been around a short time? Before drones, I had to hire a helicopter if I wanted to shoot that's no small deal, underground scanning, satellites, even scuba diving is relatively new. In the grand scheme of things, and all of those
especially
things,
for archaeology.
And all of those things combined have only popped up in our timeline very recently. I couldn't have been doing this 20 years ago. Also, I wouldn't have been prepared 20 years ago because you have to do your work. You have to learn your craft. I had to learn.
That's what I'm doing now. That's why I asked you for pointers, because on my YouTube channel, I basically started on with TikTok, just making small 2-minute videos, and then I expanded. I didn't know what I was doing. I never had any professional or any amateur.
Perfect. I never
like
my work with animation, special effects, and film was just me getting into it. Now they offer courses in it, but like in animation. But when I started, you just had to pick up a copy of Maya and ZBrush and work your way through it. And I often think that's just the best way to do it.
Yeah, that's why I like that. That's why, I never deleted any of my videos on YouTube. You could see the growth and the knowledge. Like sometimes, like I could say, like if I came across my YouTube channel in the early stages, I'd be like, okay, this is different, but it's not very entertaining, because a lot of people said entertaining. So I always got feedback. I always liked people telling me what I needed, and that's why.
Me too.
And I just
good
took
feedback
that
and bad feedback.
Yeah, exactly. And I took that and I just built that up. And it's not even, to be honest with you, like I said, like I told you earlier, I was in the military, so I was wounded in Afghanistan. I was wounded. I got blown up in Afghanistan, and then I was forced to retire. Ever since I loved history, and since I always loved history,
service, bro.
Yeah, it was an honor. It was an honor. I wouldn't change anything. I would do it again. I would probably think about it, but I would do it again. But when I was forced to retire, I didn't have any skill that I could do. I have a traumatic brain injury, so I have poor
Oh
blood flow
boy.
to the right side of my brain. I've had two
Oh,
minor strokes before,
oh my
and
goodness.
so I have all my limbs and fingers and toes and all that stuff. I just have a lot of mental issues. I also have PTSD and
Wow.
stuff like that. So, and I have
Okay.
anger issues and stuff like that. The stuff that comes with going to war and coming back and stuff like that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So when you said that what you do makes you happy, I started off with the Microsoft Surface. So I started with my website,
Yeah.
one article, just putting all my time into my website. And then I wanted to make videos, but I didn't really know how to make videos. So I just started to just do things. I just started recording myself talking about what I knew.
Good.
Then I needed to buy a laptop because the Surface wasn't working out. So I saved up some money and bought a laptop. And then I started wanting to video edit and do more. And of course, that wasn't enough. So I saved up for another year and bought me a PC and got two monitors. And now I can do the whole video editing and all the stuff that I want to do. Then I bought a drone because you said I like to get aerial footage of places that I've been to. But
Changed my life.
yeah,
It changed my
but
life
just
having a
recently.
drone.
It definitely did. And I need another one now because I was outside the 4th of July with my kids. We was popping off fireworks, but I had the drone sitting up on higher than the fireworks just so I could,
Oh,
record how it would
legend.
look for them. And
Dude.
one of them went too high up, I guess, and hit the drone, and the drone just started going all the way around. But I got the good
No.
footage, so I don't care about the
Did
drone.
you did it screw your drone up?
Yeah, the drone is gone. I don't know where it went somewhere.
Oh, what? It just went off it goes.
Yeah, just I think I hit the GPS or it messed up with the GPS or something because it's on the GPS thing and it just took off somewhere. But I got the footage of the fireworks, so that's what counts the most. But I do need another one. But like you said, it is interesting because when you get the aerial view of things, you get to see it differently.
Totally.
And I
It's
tested it out and stuff like.
It's such an interesting point of view.
Yeah, but see here in Georgia or in the states, you can't go to any state historic sites or federal sites to do that. You have to get permission. But like the little places that I go to, like the grave site on my Rumble where I went to Charles Cocock Jones. I didn't put it on that Rumble video, but I definitely I can go to places like that and I can record the aerial view of it, which I will definitely go back and probably do later on when I get a new drone. But it gives you a perspective that you can't see anywhere else. You can't see that on the ground. You can't see that the beauty of it. And I think it was one of the guys that was with you, or you could have said it when you was down on the shore when the tide was low and you was able to walk around in that location. It felt like you was almost like in New York City. One of you guys said that.
Yeah. Elio, my dear friend Elio.
Yeah.
He makes that statement. He says it's really remarkable being out here. It's almost as if you were in some kind of an ancient New York City because it's only from. And here's a crazy story about that one bit. You remember it, right?
I paid attention.
It did. It was the coolest thing. This is the weirdest story. So in 2016, I first came here to film, and we went to that actual same location. And I popped up my drone because Tim was saying, I'm detecting a bunch of structures along this coastline, this stretch of beach. And I popped up my drone, and there's drone for filming and there's drone for surveying for archaeological purposes. It's a very different mindset because with one, you're kind of pointing straight down and trying to see if you can pick up any structures, whereas when you're filming to film, you're trying to get the most beautiful shot possible, and I popped my drone up and I looked down and I scanned the area, and I remember thinking, there's nothing in this bit. There's nothing. How wrong was I? In 2018, 2 years later, there was a huge storm. Because we're first line of the Atlantic Ocean, so we get some pretty crazy weather here, and Sure enough, I moved here. I went back to the same spot. All of the sand had been washed away. I popped my drone up and I just about, I'm getting goosebumps. Because I remember the day, I just about flipped out. I said, boy, was I wrong. Wow, there's definitely stuff under there. And it turns out, like Elio said, um, that there were absolutely structures there on a monumental scale, um, and it shows that that part of the coastline had a prehistoric, so dated how you want in the sense of 3,000 to 10,000 years old.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll be more specific. That came out incorrectly, but it shows we have studied it. We know how the general age of it, but it goes to show you have to continuously keep at it. You have to keep at it. There's this there's everything, every tool that we have at our disposal today helps in this process like nothing before in history. It's crazy. It's crazy. I'm rambling again. Sorry. As look, the Rishat structure is mesmerizing.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be one of the most powerfully beautiful geological formations that you could, or structures, call it what you want to call it, that you can set your eye on. It's absolutely stunning. But when you look at it in context, there's nothing about it that coincides with Plato's writings,
Yeah.
with the only exception that it happens to have this concentric circular shape.
Mm.
However, there's so many. I'll give you another pointer. Right where I am, I'm only 14 kilometers across from Africa.
Mm.
So the Atlas Mountains, I can see them from here on a clear day. Um, the which is what Plato said. The Rishat structure is about 1,500 kilometers.
Yeah, that's the only thing that didn't make. That's the only thing that doesn't give the
It's
information.
also Plato gives you the exact size of the concentric circular city. Plato says it was X amount of stadia from the outermost ring to the innermost, and it gives you the inner area. Essentially, it adds up to this circular city having a diameter of approximately 2 kilometers, right? Or thereabouts. The Rishat structure is about 60 or 47 kilometers in. Also, it happens to be 500 meters, which is 1,500 feet above sea level. People say, well, yeah, but it used to have an inland sea there. Hold on a minute. It's still 1,500 feet above sea level. And secondly, we got to talk about how, if you think that was a city with such enormous, the whole point that men throughout history created cities like Venice that were built in a lagoon was to be able to, because back in the day, water, it still is today, but water was the highway of the ancient world.
Yeah.
You can come in with a boat. Your boat is full of merchandise. You discharge the merchandise onto smaller boats, and those smaller boats go in through the canals. And there were, bridges from one canal to the other. And you could basically come out of your house and shout across to your best friend's house across the canal and say, "Hey, Joe, I'll be over. I'll be over in a couple hours." The canals, the inner areas that you see at the Rishat structures are kilometers apart. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody would with the humans living there, 500 meters tall, it's absolutely absurd. It is certainly not a man-made structure, and it definitely has the indicate. They were back when they first pointed it out. Astronauts had been using these the formations on the Earth to kind of give them an idea of where they were, and they would see this Rishat structure and they'd be like, "Oh, we're above Mauritania." And when they first looked at it, Mauritania is not the easiest place to get to. and it's understudied. But when they first looked at it, they suggested it was a meteor, a cosmic impact. And then somebody was trying to suggest it was a giant lava dome bubble, which to me is the most absolutely asinine, ridiculous explanation. To have a dome bubble that's 40 kilometers across, I don't think so. But what you have to do is you have to consider the surrounding environment. And what I see when I see the Rishat structure is I see what likely looks like a comet blast.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
a low density object with a heavy, maybe a nucleus of some sort, dirty snowball coming down and bursting from pressure a few kilometers above the ground, causing this circular ripple effect. And another thing that you can tell is the entire part that is basically where the Rishat structure is basically the epicenter of the sand belt. The sand belt being the Sahara Desert, then it goes through the Middle East, then it goes through the Gobi Desert until it eventually fades out. So you have this massive sand belt at the heart of which you have this Rishat structure. So I can't help but think that the Rishat structure in one way had a point to play with the formation of the Sahara Desert, which they say is only 10, 12, 11,000 years old. This is another clue. On the opposite side of the Atlantic, way on the other side, you've got another formation, which they say is 11,000, 10,000 years old, which is the Amazon rainforest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to myself, that's freaking weird. How is it that two completely opposing landscapes have the same age? Could they have been made at the same time? So could all of the ingredients needed to create the Sahara Desert and the ingredients needed to create the Amazon rainforest come from the same cosmic impact? What I mean to say is something causes the Rishat structure, devastates the whole planet, causes God knows how much trauma everywhere, starts to cause this blanket of sand, which you can actually, if you look around the Rishat structure, you see erosion patterns that look like sand blasting. And then imagine a series of such tremendous tsunamis making their way towards America, towards the Amazon basin, flooding the Amazon basin, covering over whatever cities existed there. And then suddenly you have a deposit of soil from way under the ocean floor. And thousands of years go by and you start getting all of these crazy trees and this tropical rainforest. There's some sense to that. So do I think the Rishat structure is Atlantis? Of course not. No, it's not man-made structure. It's certainly not a city. But do I think it might have at some point had something to do with the destruction of Atlantis? I wouldn't rule that out.
That's interesting. That is actually an interesting point. I like that.
Right?
That
Right?
it could have its relationship because of its destruction.
Because of its destruction.
Wow, yo,
And
you
they said that it wasn't in the end they were suggesting, well, it turns out it wasn't a meteorite. Now, meteorite's not the same composition as a comet. They were saying because there wasn't enough indication of trace substances like iridium and substances which come from cosmic bodies. But to tell you the truth, I don't think they've really researched it enough. You know,
I don't think they have either, because to be honest with you, that what you just said made a lot of sense and it put a lot of things into perspective for me about that.
It totally makes sense to me. I certainly makes more sense to me than a giant lava bubble.
I'm gonna look more into that. I'm actually gonna look more into that. That's actually a good point. Very interesting.
There were some conclusions drawn to the fact that they had found some like lava chambers and whatnot. But that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean it excludes this possibility.
No, two things can be right at the same time. Just happen at
Absolutely.
different ways. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. So yeah,
So that's what
okay.
I think of the Rashad structure. It's
I
not a
appreciate that. I, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you being honest and giving your perspective on why and so on, and not just saying that how some people try to divert or direct themselves to saying the reason why it's not this is because this is the place. You're saying this is not it because the signs saying so many different ways, and you're using what you can use at this time. So I really do appreciate your time. I really appreciate you sharing
And
what you have. I'm definitely
one last detail is
okay.
strategy.
Yeah.
Strategy. Humans have always built strategically. Their
Yep.
centers of operations have always been built strategically. When you look at the area of Cádiz, it's about as strategic as probably the most strategic place on the planet, because if you controlled the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea,
Yep.
which is one of the most desirable places for men and women, people to live, for the climate, for the general, it's always been a lovely place to be.
Yeah.
And there were only ever one way in and one way out of the Mediterranean in antiquity, and that was here
Yep.
in Gadir at the entrance of the straits. So any ship that came in and you had to charge them, they got charged their taxes and whatever.
Mm.
You could control. You would be infinitely rich.
Yeah.
When you think of strategy, because you would control all maritime commerce, trade
Mm-hmm.
coming in and out of the Mediterranean. Uh, so it makes total sense to build. What would you have outcrops in other places? Sure.
Yeah.
Would there
City
be?
posts,
Of
stuff
course.
like that.
So if I think of the Azores, do I think it was part of the? Yes, absolutely. Don't think it was the headquarters just because it's kind of far out. It's not that
Yeah.
easy because you gotta, the islands are, it's quite a trek to get there. However, when it comes to the Rashad structure, if you hypothesize that it once was some kind of a city, which it wasn't, for the size, for every reason available, you have to realize that strategically speaking, it would have been a ridiculous place to put a capital city of Atlantis, because or a great empire, because even if there was, even if there was a waterway that led to it, it's 500 kilometers from the Atlantic. So
Yeah.
you'd have to sail in 500 kilometers, no small feat, to then what? To then just discharge all your goods, and that doesn't make any sense. One of the most important things is has to be international. So the distribution on this has to go global. I really think that this is the kind of project that the whole world needs to see, and we already have an idea of where it's going to come out, but it has to be without a question a platform which a global audience can watch.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we're working on now, and obviously building up excitement.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, this is how you do it. Do these podcasts, building the excitement through the
you know
podcast, promoting yourself, sharing your
just
stuff.
telling people, hey, look, we've got something. And even the most skeptical of people, we're not ghost hunters, we're actually scientists and researchers, and I think people will really really dig it when they see it.
Oh, they
I
will.
hope
They
so.
will. Because I mean, a lot of, I mean, we talk about it. I mean, a lot of us from Cosmic Summit, we do podcasts in between us anyway. We all talk to each other. And so we all have this, the basic, understanding. And like I said, I'm going to be at Cosmic Summit. I'm going to promote your work. I enjoy your work. Everything that I said about you is true. Rest in peace, Timothy. Timothy helped you along, get you on that journey. So rest in peace. And thank you for him for sharing the knowledge to give to you, to give to us. And I'm glad that you did what you did, and I'm glad he did what he did, and everybody on your team, and everybody that helped you, and everybody that you helped along the way, also, because of course you got to give credit to those people too.
Yeah.
And then it's always, I really enjoyed this, and I'm hoping everything works out for you, for everything that you're doing. You're a special person. You're a good guy. Keep your head up. Your wife She's doing great with you. You know what I'm saying? She's helping you out. So, you know, thanks to her because without her, I mean, you probably wouldn't be able to have the strength to do what you're doing now. So, you know, big ups to her, you know? So can't leave that out. Your dog, I think I saw your dog walk out. Your dog.
Oh, she's awesome. My little chocolate lab. She's so cool.
I think I saw a dog walk out or something like that.
She's just about the sweetest creature on the planet. She wants me to take her for a walk.
So I'll let you get back. I'll let you get to that then. But Michael, I really appreciate that, man. And I'm always going to be thinking about Timothy. We're never going to forget Timothy from across the waters. We're going to remember him. All right.
All right, brother. Thank you so much, man. I really enjoyed this, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Okay. Oh yeah, definitely. We will. You have a good day, man. Appreciate it.
Ciao, bro. Ciao.
Ciao.